So I'm going to do a talk today, which I'll just share, based on more around what the working environment looks like now. Obviously, we appreciate it's changed a lot pretty suddenly over the last few weeks. So I'm going to do a bit of a basis talk around that. And over the last 4 weeks, I've collated data from 25 businesses and then 50 different employees, varying in industry within embedded software and electronics. So I'm Alexander Hood from Computer Futures. We're an IT consultancy focused mainly on project delivery and management and recruitment as well. I'll be talking again through the new working normal. It's a new word that keeps being thrown around in the media. I'm sure everyone's wondering if they'll ever go back to the office and if they actually want to go back to the office. If you've got young kids, you might want to, but for some people, they'll be quite keen to get back. So a quick agenda, just working from home, what sort of challenges and solutions have businesses faced and employees? What did the research show? The insights into different industries and how they've responded, because of course, everyone can work differently. So some businesses can't work remotely really, and then others have got, you know, it's pretty much as easy as anything really. And then a small case study based on one business at the end. Of course, the data is all anonymous, and then the Q&A at the end as well. So first of all, after speaking to many employees, the first problem they faced was equipment. So like myself, I didn't really have a setup at home. I'm now currently sat on a, what's it called, a camping chair with basically a bit of wood put over a couple of legs that I put together. So that's my working environment now. So in terms of what most businesses were doing that I spoke to, so around sort of 85% had allowed their workforce to expense office furniture. Due to that, obviously helping their working environment. I think we take for granted expensive office chairs. I know I did for free. That was a hard one to come by. Probably need your son's osteopath soon at the rate I'm going. So yeah, creating a nice healthy work environment for yourself, as well as getting rid of clutter from your own house as well to help with that. You can't expense a cleaner, unfortunately, they didn't allow that. So it was just the furniture really. A number of businesses have also have increased their spend on technologies and systems. So a lot of businesses we work with in embedded software and hardware, mainly the hardware. They weren't really set up to do much remote working. Obviously, people were on site working with the equipment, but they've now put in place new tools and new systems to improve working from home, and also allowed them to expense equipment, hardware equipment as well. Mental health. So this was actually quite a big one for me. I'm a young person in sales, so we take mental health very seriously. And I actually saw a really, really great stat, which was 64% of the companies I spoke to over the last 3 months had reached out to third-party mental health companies to come in and do one-on-one counselling and group motivation talks and engagement talks about how they can still get the best out of themselves and, you know, what they should do if they're feeling anxious or worried working from home, because it's a very different environment, and it can be very tough at times as well. Can everyone do it? Absolutely not, unfortunately. One business I spoke to was an aerospace client. You know, their testing is sometimes even done abroad in different laboratories because they need certain temperatures and thermal tests. So they need to get back in site for the clean rooms and the lab. So for them, it just wasn't possible. Again, just one of the challenges they face, and for a company, they'll always unfortunately be in the office one way or another. So in terms of the actual data and what I collated from it, most companies I spoke to, especially based within IT and software, had seen an increased efficiency in work. And what I basically mean by that statistic is quite broad, is they saw that actually deadlines were getting hit earlier than planned. So most actual employees had reinvented their working week. So all their work was task driven. So their manager would put all the tasks together, dish it out at the beginning of the week or the month, however big the task was. And they would say, you need to complete that and come back to me when it's done. They stopped the working week, Monday to Friday. They basically employed a Tuesday Scrum meeting, Zoom meeting to discuss things, but basically said, as long as this piece of work is completed by this point, I don't really mind when you do the working week. So they had a lot of flexibility. And I know they did start, you know, a few of the guys there who were software engineers were doing, you know, the odd Saturday morning or Sunday evening. So, I mean, I can't think of anything worse, but for them, it worked, and that's the flexibility of getting the working from home. As again, just spoke about the new working week, so lots of companies are now thinking about that. It's obviously for some going to take a lot longer to implement. Company sizes is the main thing. It's easy for a small startup of 25, 30 engineers to work from home, but for a company with 1,000 employees, it's not going to be as simple. The reduced costs, so reduced costs for employees, their travel went down substantially, of course, and then that comes in with the time aspect. So time is a cost, and their time was reduced, and their hours, they could actually work relatively more hours because they dropped their commuting time. So their working day went down by an hour and a half. So, they were finishing at 4 o'clock, which worked well for people with kids and other activities. And the employers, well, long term, they're probably tied into a lot of leases, like some business owners on here might be. So they've got to run those down, but a lot are planning on reducing office space and creating, if they're hardware designers, they'll just create labs rather than having everyone in one office with the backroom staff and HR. So that's going to be a reduced cost for them as well. Employee welfare and happiness. So that was, again, an enjoyable statistic. So I found that 95% of the candidates, employees I spoke to were really enjoying the flexibility. I think the autonomy of having to control their work gave them a lot of freedom. I think it definitely makes people feel more able to take leadership of what they're doing. And when you take a creative person and they're working on their own, it can be very creative and it can have some, great benefits rather than being maybe shadowed by another employee in a very small office. So yeah, everyone seemed relatively more happy. Again, maybe the ones with young kids had a few complaints to make, but I think they bought an Xbox and that sorted most things out anyway. The one statistic I got from most of the business was they genuinely thought, or generally was the word, thought that it negatively affected engagement, which I thought is maybe just most businesses getting used to the switch over. I wasn't really too sure that the employees themselves really felt less engaged. I think maybe the employers just felt like because they can't, see the employees get brought into a project, can't see the passion in the workplace, they maybe thought the engagement went down. And of course, with that comes, less camaraderie in the office and things like that. So, Zoom bingo and all those sorts are definitely things people should be implementing in their teams to definitely drive the engagement as well. So a bit of industry insights. So the 25 businesses were from a broad spectrum of industries. I wouldn't have covered all of them. So of course, this data isn't the same for everyone. It's not one rule. It's very much each business to their own. Electronics, as I said, they were basically expensing all the hardware for their employees, creating environments for their employees to work from home for the foreseeable future. That comes with problems for the business because upgrading equipment for every employee does have its problems. And again, that would probably only work more with a small to medium company. Large companies with a big hardware team wouldn't be able to fund buying them all the equipment. On a genuine and very relative note, cybersecurity. So we spoke to a lot of clients who said, in the last sort of 3 months, they've had to rebudget a lot of their other things from R&D over to the security of their VPN connections and their data. I spoke with 4 or 5 companies who are completely revamping their server and cloud storage to basically ensure it's more secure and who's getting onto the VPN at what times. The digital-based interview process. Now, this is something really fun. I don't know if anyone here has actually maybe interviewed or been interviewed through it, but we worked with a client in Bristol and basically completely reinvented their interview process. So they were going through a big hiring phase before coronavirus and wanted 4 or 5 heads. Budgets went down. They could only get 2 or 3 heads on, but still wanted to bring them on. So we reinvented the whole process online in terms of surveys, sort of forms to fill out, different information to make it as slick as possible. And we actually found, that company specifically found that the actual environment suited the engineers more. They said they came across a lot better than previous face-to-face engineers had, and they felt like they had an opportunity to really showcase their work through using the share screen method and talking through their work. And some of the engineers even made it interactive, which was really fun to see. So that was a really sort of positive win that we saw. And then obviously, if you do want any help implementing sort of digital interview processes, feel free to reach out at the end. The handshake no longer exists. So yeah, it's a long goner, I think. A lot of companies have said to me offhand as a joke that, you know, we're not going to do it anymore. I made the mistake of shaking someone's hand today when I first met them, but you can't, it's just ingrained in society, unfortunately. So I think in the next, 6 months or so, companies will get real firm on this and start clamping down to say that this is just not allowed anymore. And then finally, communication tools, I think, is one of the key ones. I think right now I probably feel the most connected I've ever felt. I mean, I'm on sort of 2-3 hour Zoom calls every day, and it always strays off talking about Bob's cat in the background, Socks, who's got white feet or something like that. So it is something that's going to be here to stay, and I think it's something that's going to become more and more used, especially in terms of the how much cheaper it is to use digital. I know in my industry, which is sales, we say you always meet the customer, you always meet the person you need to do it, but to be honest, we don't. So it's a cold hard truth that salespeople might not like, but we don't really need to do it anymore. If you can build trust over Zoom, then there's no point in meeting them in person. Plus, you might not find out any weird hobbies they like. So it's always a winner. So as I said, one case study I took directly from a company I work quite closely with. This is basically all the data I got from them as one company. So they develop medical equipment for veterinary services, mainly sort of different bits of hardware. And they said the overall results in terms of efficiency and staffing, COVID-19 had an actual positive effect. So before coronavirus, they were due to hire a new engineer, which they needed for a couple of months. But after coronavirus hit, they actually saw their efficiency go up by 20%. And again, as I said earlier, that's in terms of the tasks they were setting were getting completed a lot quicker than they anticipated and what they would have if they were in the office, which is an interesting stat, but as again, wouldn't be the same for everyone. The managers I spoke to in this company, it was 3 separate managers with 3 different teams ranging from 5, 7 and 9 employees. They actually said their workload had increased, which was interesting, but that feeds back to the fact that they didn't have the right software or tools put in place where they could track people's performance at home. So they were basically having to catch up with all their employees at the end of every day to run through what they'd done and talk through it. Whereas we all know there's a lot of data out there now, a lot of programs that can collate that and then put it to you in a much easier readable format. They did say that employees seem less engaged. Again, it came up earlier. I think we run through some sort of suggestions for them. So running a kitchen Zoom call at 12 o'clock so everyone can sort of catch up over a coffee. Again, the end of day call, which could be more about what people are doing in their evenings with their passions. And then also, again, the Friday or whatever, whenever you're working weekends, thrown in sort of a bingo, or karaoke is a popular one we use at the moment, just to really sort of engage people and try and build a bit more rapport with maybe people who have been onboarded whilst it's been digital. So yeah, and again, they spent a lot of money on their internal systems and equipment, so they upgraded a lot of it quite quickly, updated their database from an old sort of Microsoft Access up to a SQL, and then continued upgrading their embedded tools and their hardware tools they were using to newer equipment. So for them, it's been a good break from business. They've been able to get a lot of things done. Again, I don't think they were happy about the break in business, but you've got to take a glass half full approach. So it's a small win in terms of cost efficiency for a company. Interestingly enough, improved communication. So they actually found now that people were remote, they were a lot more forthcoming with issues they were facing. So they'd find that in the office, people would tend to bury their heads in the sand around the team, not wanting to sort of speak up around the problem for fear of coming off maybe, not as smart as the rest of the guys. So we actually found the communication across the departments and the teams had improved dramatically, and they were actually finding the solutions to the problems a lot quicker, which again goes down to the increased communication between them, which is always good to see. And I think in the next coming months, I know that majority of companies aren't going to look back to going back 100%. Out of the 25 I spoke to, not a single one said that all the software, hardware teams will be coming in 100%. It won't happen again. So it's an interesting food for thought about what the new working norm is. I think what the new working norm is different for everyone, but I definitely think we'll, in the next few years, see a change in the working week and a change in the working day as well. So it'll be completely different for everyone. But as I said, guys, thanks for listening. I appreciate you staying on this long, as it's been a boiling hot day. So yeah, I'll take any questions, but as again, thank you for listening, and that's my contact details on there as well.
Yeah, Alexander, thank you very much. That really interesting. Yes, really interesting. Thank you very much. Looks like there are a number of questions. So,
in the case study, did they check that there was really an increase in efficiency, or is it just a reduction in annual leave?
No, so in terms of the study itself, it was based on when obviously the guys were there, it's based on literally how quick the tasks were getting completed. So originally where they'd have lead times of maybe 5 to 7 days, the lead time had gone down to more sort of 5 days. I don't think that was included. I didn't include it myself, and I'm sure when I got the statistic off the company, they wouldn't have included it. So I do know that, yeah, unfortunately, we're all slipping into the habit of not taking holiday at the moment. So you're completely right, that might have been a factor as well.
Were the developers getting tasks done faster because they had no outside distractions during this lockdown?
I mean, most guys I spoke to, they still, they were sort of mid-30s guys with families at home. So they were always juggling things as well. So, I mean, that could be a factor in it. I mean, that could be a factor in an office space as well in terms of other distractions going on. So that could have definitely been a factor. I think the previous comment around the annual leave might have played a big part. People aren't really taking holiday currently. So the increase in efficiency and speed of doing the work could be down to them just clocking up more hours or being more flexible with their time.
So just a quick plug, the next meetup is going to be, virtual meetup is going to be on the 16th of September. Ken, I wanted, what's your view on the future of autonomous cars and hacking? Is that just going to be great fun for you in the future, or what?
So I've got a really simple view on that, is that we can't get the security of connected vehicles right yet. We're still learning there. And I think there's something like $19 billion being spent on autonomous vehicles already across lots of different manufacturers. And even now, they can't get the autonomy right. So how are we going to get the security of those fixed? I mean, I think we're trying to run before we can walk here. I think we've got a lot of catching up to do before we can do Fast and Furious 9, where there's nothing for the hacker to do. Okay,
and then just one more question as well. For me, and then if anybody else has got any final questions. AI, right? I see a lot of work going into AI, putting AI on edge gateways and things. Have you got any experience, or from the hacker viewpoint, will you be using AI in near term to do hacking, or what's your view on that? How many tools?
That's a really interesting question.
Hack systems.
Is there truly AI, or are we really talking about machine learning? I mean,
well,
that's
machine learning, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, which I won't get into.
But learning, whatever. Yeah.
What has been interesting is how you can influence the behavior of ML or AI by tampering with the data it's ingesting. It has to learn. So if you start to interfere with the sensor data it receives, the data that get gathered from platforms, you're going to influence how that telemetry behaves. And already there's been some really interesting research looking at Google Translate and how you can influence its outputs by tampering with what it ingests. That's how Google Translate works. It doesn't have a dictionary. It just goes and looks at translations and see what happens. And if you start tampering with the data it's sucking in, different things happen being put out. And that's what worries me. Tampering with sensors, tampering with what ML and AI are starting to ingest and causing problems with the output.